I'm Mike.
I'm Jason.
This is Snake Envy. So we were at Pomona. What has that been now? 2 weekends ago?
Yeah.
Going on 2 weekends. One of the biggest reptile expos in the country. It's always fascinating to see a much wider scope of animals at a show like that than what we have here locally typically. It's always pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's anything and everything.
There was lots of stuff I wanted.
Yeah. and you got a few things.
Yep.
That's always one of the challenges too. Can you sell more than you buy when you're at an expo? So look, we were having some conversations while we were there, and we've been talking about it a little bit since. And we thought it might be interesting to talk about kind of the market, the reptile market, and fads come and go. Prices climb and fall. I was always a huge critic of the ball python craze. I thought it was bad for the hobby when so much inventory is invested in one species. I thought it was terrible for expos when you'd go to an expo and 75-80% of the tables are one species. I just didn't think it was good for the hobby. We've also talked about the fact that we really don't think they're the best beginner snake, but they kind of became...
They're that go-to now.
They're the go-to now for beginners. I think that's unfortunate. I don't think that's really good for the hobby. There's much better options. But the one good that came from all of that is when ball pythons are selling at kind of a minimum of $500 and up, and many of them were going for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 there for a while. It actually got people used to the idea that all these animals are valuable. And it kind of brought up prices across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
And so that's good if everything is a little more valuable after that. But there's still challenges. I think we both know colubrid breeders who got completely out of the colubrid market.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a conversation with one, and I couldn't blame him. He's like, look, I'm sitting here at a show, and these guys over here are getting hundreds and even thousands of dollars for each of their animals, and sometimes I got to settle for like $25 for, or $50 at the most for like a California king snake. And he's like, these are great snakes, and now nobody wants them. So you can't blame those guys for jumping ship, but it exacerbated the problem because now you just had more and more and more and more people breeding balls. You made an interesting observation at the show regarding balls in terms of what people were selling.
Well, and even like leopard geckos and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's interesting because I rarely have anything over that's like a year old. I rarely have anything that's for sale after. I sell every year.
Yeah.
And even if I have to wholesale something, I will, to make room for the new.
Yeah.
But it's like, you see these ball python breeders and leopard geckos and bearded dragons, whatever, and there's adults. Their whole displays are all mostly adults.
Yeah.
And that is interesting to me because that never happens. But then my animals aren't, the animals I work with are, the species I work with is a better way to say it, is they're just not oversaturated.
Right.
In the market.
So people are still breeding balls, but now they can't sell enough of them, so they're starting to sell the adults is kind of what you're figuring.
Well, yeah, that's always interesting to me. Like, you're trying to sell a snake and you raise it, it doesn't sell before it reaches adulthood. Like, one, that market's saturated, or two, it's overpriced.
Right. We talk about that all the time. There are some breeders that will not budge.
Yeah. Which is fine.
And they would rather, eventually have 2-3-year-old snakes in their inventory than budge on price. And yes, I mean, that's their choice. But at some point, it's probably more profitable to take a little hit on the price than to keep feeding a snake for another year or two, right? So you always have to kind of weigh that out. But some breeders won't. Their snakes are worth what they're worth.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be willing to give a little. I get it. There are certain morphs, certain projects, certain where I can see that, where a breeder's like, no, this is what they cost.
Oh, for sure.
But
there's always a case.
there's always going to be something like that. But if you're doing that for like half or 3/4 of your inventory where you just won't budge, you're just oversaturating the market because you're going to be breeding again, and that just means you're going to have that many more going into next year.
Well, yeah, and that's what kind of this topic is about a little bit. It's like, why are you making more if you can't sell the ones you have? That doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get that philosophy.
And how long does it take for people to realize that maybe the prices have peaked and it's time to start coming down again? The two kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to the breeder's discretion if they want to.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you're forced to if the market changes.
Yeah. So we were having some interesting conversations along these same lines because you've made a decision recently to kind of back away from Mexican black king snakes.
Cal Kings,
Cow kings a
corns.
bit. Corns. It wasn't that long ago that MBKs were like one of
Just a few years ago.
the very, very hot tickets.
Yeah. And people still love them, and they still sell.
They're great snakes.
Oh, they're awesome.
But they're not worth, a run-of-the-mill MBK is not worth $500. It never was.
No.
Even though people were able to get that there for a little bit. I remember seeing some prices that just blew me away, and I was like, it wasn't that long ago when you were lucky to get $100 for them. And now they were going for $4 or $5 and more. That's an example, I think, of everybody maybe getting a little too excited. And hey, something's worth whatever anybody will pay for it. But at the same time, you got to know when to adjust. And if you're too late in adjusting, then you're sitting on a bunch of animals. What people are willing to pay is sometimes very, very fickle. Very fickle. It can change year to year.
Oh, it does.
So we were talking to our good friend John, Morphet Reptiles. He's scaling back a little bit on hognose. That's another snake that for the past few years has been, the snake in a lot of people's eyes. And it's not that he's getting out of that at all. It's just that, how many morphs are too many morphs? How many subspecies are too many subspecies? I mean, he's scaling it back a little bit where he's going to sell more of a core product offering that should still be desirable for a long time.
It's still a good market. The hognose is still a good market. It's just a little saturated. To me,
right.
What all that says is there needs to be some adjustments in pricing. Whether people want to do it. I know I have a friend of mine, he gets pissed off when he thinks of like a $500 hognose and he's going to sell it for $150 less. And he's like, he just thinks, I'm leaving $150 on the table.
Right.
Me personally, I'm thinking $350, that's pretty good money. I'll take it.
Yeah, you look at it the opposite way. I'm leaving $350 on the table when I say no. And maybe you say no the first time, and then after you 2 or 3 people are trying to talk you down, you listen and you say, okay, people aren't willing to pay that anymore. But that's tough. It's always tough to try to gauge that on the fly, yet alone year to year. But bottom line, you're going to have fewer king snakes available next year because now you're offloading some of your adults.
Yeah, I'm probably going to scale back even more on stuff.
So if you're looking for adult kings, you know where to go.
And it's just like you were talking about, like people, I'm going to switch from this species to ball pythons or clubers to ball pythons. Just I don't know. That's weird for me because it's like, I only work with what I like. If I don't like it, I'm not going to have it. Because I'm not going to go invest in this because there's money in there. yeah, I do what I like. But that's me. Everybody's different. And I don't know.
In the small business world, that's kind of business 101. You know, if you're not excited about what you're selling, then how can you expect to get anybody else excited about it? There are people that do it and just try to offer whatever they think somebody wants. But there's also challenges in terms of husbandry when you're trying to accommodate different snakes with vastly different husbandry all in the same room. You know, sometimes that's a challenge. So it's not easy when you start getting into that stuff, and that's what complicates all these decisions. Now, on the flip side of it, you and I have invested a little bit, and we're going to get into an African house snake project. This is kind of on the opposite side of this conversation because they really haven't taken off yet.
Yeah.
They're here, they're established, there's several breeders that work with them.
And there's lots of new stuff.
There are people out there who are absolutely excited about house snakes, but they are a long way from hognose or, even, I would say, even gopher snakes. There is still a ton of people out there that know nothing about them. We think they're primed to be a big thing, partly because they're very easy to breed. They're very prolific breeders. They don't require brumation. And we think they make amazing pets. Yeah. They have a great temperament, and they are amazing eaters. In fact, they're very entertaining to watch eat because some of them are very, very aggressive eaters as well. They can actually be a lot of fun. So we're excited about them. Now, when we first started talking about it, we did what a lot of people do, and we kind of got excited about all the shiny things and said, oh, what about these guys? What about those guys? Oh, those guys would be cool. We did what people do.
Yeah.
Now we've kind of decided on capes and maybe blacks, and that's about it.
Species.
Yeah. So a couple subs. There's definitely some morphs within those subs, so we can offer a good variety. But we're sticking with the ones that are easy and that we feel like make the absolute best pets.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there. Maybe somewhere down the road,
we'll try to experiment into something a little more tricky, but
yeah.
I kind of like the challenge of gray banded kings, mountain kings.
Yes.
I kind of like that.
No, you're never worried about problem feeders. Consumers, on the other hand, no matter how well you establish them, they freak out the first time they skip a meal. But yeah, it's kind of the opposite side of it. We're trying to kind of time the market a little bit. We think the market's ready for these snakes. We're starting small, and then we'll kind of build. But what if we started too small? What if we don't have enough? We've already had debates about prices and how much is too much, how much is too little. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and it'll be easy to figure out, if you're breeding something and it's just you can't sell it, because this is what the market says, this is what everybody says it is, and you post it and it sits there and you don't get any inquiries or very few.
Right.
That's a telltale sign.
And so far they're selling well. So far that's not been a big challenge, but we're also not asking what some other breeders are asking. So we'll see where that all levels off. One of the things that is really interesting in the hobby today that didn't exist maybe even 10 to 15 years ago is that the effect of social media and the effect of YouTube and the effect. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that somebody like Snake Discovery literally has the clout now and the following to really drive the market.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, some of these, there's a lot of influencers out there that can kind of turn the market on whatever they social media is really, I'm old school, been doing this 30 years, and now I'm here doing a YouTube video.
Right.
I don't know necessarily I'm made for this, but I feel like I have to do this because I will become irrelevant a little bit. Even though I've had a name, but I feel like there's so many new
Right.
hobbyists and people. It's like, if you don't, I might get left behind a little bit. So.
Yeah, you got to keep your name out there. And at the same time, you got to make people aware of all the great things that you offer. And so, that's what we'll be doing. We'll be promoting African house snakes. We'll be promoting bull snakes and gopher snakes. You're looking to expand a little more into Asian rat snakes. You've been doing primarily, not entirely, but you've been doing primarily North American rat snakes. Now you're expanding a bit into Asian. That's actually really cool, really exciting.
Fun,
yeah, they're so different than the North American ones, and some of them are so much bigger.
And some are, there's just so much. There's so much, and there's so many pretty animals out there, neat animals. And I might, you might get some, and you might. Actually, I've had radiated rat snakes before. Like I got probably 20 years ago, I bought a pair of albino radiated rats, and I didn't enjoy that at all. That was, so there might be, we'll figure it out.
You were a bit of a trailblazer on the Pituophis side. I think you were kind of heavily invested in pits really before they... I would even say they're still underrated, technically.
Well, especially the gopher snakes.
Especially gophers,
I feel like bulls are, they're out there. And everybody's jumping on that bandwagon. I've noticed the last 4 years, people jumping on and working with them, which is great. But I feel like gopher snakes are still a little underrated.
Yeah, without a doubt. But looking back on your 30 years, is there a project you passed on and then said, crap, something that really took off? Or is there something, you mentioned the radiated rats, but is there another example of something you jumped in and said, hey, I don't care what the market's doing. I don't want to work with these guys?
Yeah, I actually did. When hognose were coming out 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I thought they were neat. And then I got some and I didn't really love them at first. I didn't understand them. I learned to, now I enjoy them. I like the little hissy fits and the little fun little act they put on at first I was like, why are these things pissed off? And I didn't enjoy it. But then after keeping them after a while, I'm like, these guys are funny. They're pretty funny. What is this attitude about? But I learned to love them. They grew on me. Yeah. But I could have been in that market a long time ago and probably had a name in that market and
didn't jump in fast.
I didn't. And at the time I wasn't on board with it. Not because of the popularity. It was because I didn't enjoy them as much at the time. But after keeping them for a while, I remember I had a friend. Yeah. He sent me a group and he says, just breed these, work with them. And I was like, ugh. And I did. And after about a year, I was like, these guys are pretty funny. So yeah.
Well, that's how I feel about house snakes, because in a way, they don't fit what usually excites me about snakes. I usually don't get excited about the smaller species. I usually don't get excited about ones that are a little plainer in terms of color and pattern. They're not as aggressively patterned as like a bull snake or a gopher snake or a king snake. They have amazing heads and head pattern and those python eyes. But in a lot of ways, they don't fit what I would normally be drawn to in a snake. But now since I've had one, and now since I've spent time with yours, I love them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just have to grow on you a little bit, and sometimes you have to experience their personalities. The house snake I have, a female, amazing temperament, handling. She loves it. She's curious, but she's not flighty. But watching her eat is a joy. Oh
yeah, it's fun watching them wrap up.
She coils up.
Yeah,
and
about 6 loops.
6 loops, and she comes launching at prey. It's just different than most of the other snakes. Now, some of it she's only been in captivity a couple years. We'll see. Maybe some of that'll change. But the majority of my snakes are much calmer. They're much, They're much less aggressive when they eat. It's just a little less entertaining overall. So sometimes it's small things like that where you go, wow, just like the personality with the hogs, and they throw their little tantrums or they play dead, and you think, wow, these guys are actually kind of cool. That's what draws us to Pituophis, and that's what makes some people afraid of them is their defensive displays.
Oh yeah, it's like they're mean, they're ornery. It's like, to me, it's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I always have a kick at the expos when we have one that's being a little hissy and carrying on, and you can pick them up and take them out. And it always draws a crowd because people are like, how come he's not biting you? What's going on? And
it's cool because they're having this fit and you can just hold it in your palm of your hand.
Right.
And this thing's just sitting there. It's not trying to bite you per se, but he's on alert. If anything's going to come, he's going to hiss and lunge and
he's hissing. He's got his mouth open. The tongue's going.
People think that's a mean or aggressive animal, and it's part of the personality.
Yeah, it's just what it is. And so, there's always those subtleties about different species that get people excited or not excited about them, and that's a lot of the fun. Is there one where you feel like you missed the boat? So hogs, you didn't miss the boat entirely. Maybe you misjudged the timing of the market a little bit, but you're there now.
Yeah.
Is there one where you feel like you missed the boat altogether and never got into that? Maybe in hindsight, you're like, I wish I had a couple pair of those.
There's definitely like a species of milk snake or color morph or this or that well, here's one. I just thought about it. I've had bared rat snakes before I had hypos. Man, it's been 20, 25 years. I've missed having those things. They're awesome.
They are. Yeah. Transpecos too.
Yep. And I've had those too. And I miss having those.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what the market is. I know for Bairds, there's a pretty strong market. I don't know what the market is like for Transpecos, but they would sure be fun.
There's a market. I don't know. You don't see a lot of Transpecos out there. You're starting to see a lot of Bairds because there's morphs. Yep. There's new morphs available or soon to be, and that will invigorate that species. But they're just. It's really probably. I would say Bairds are probably, at least in my opinion, one of the. As far as the North American rats, they're intriguing. They're pretty intriguing.
Without a doubt.
Very different.
All right. So in addition to liking, subscribing, commenting, tell us what you think. What's going on in the market? What's maybe not as hot anymore as it was, and we're going to start to see a decline? What's that species out there that you all know should be much more popular than it is, but nobody's talking about?
Yeah.
What's going to be the next big thing? And what has kind of peaked and it's on the way out? Let us know what you think.
Thanks.